There's a train coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to it be Susan. You don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord, yeah. People get ready for the train to Jordan. Now there ain't no room for the hopeless sinner who's hard on mankind just to save his own. Have pity on those whose chances are thinner, 'cause there's no hiding place from the kingdom stone. Oh, people get ready, there's a train coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board on it. Now get ready.
and asked the university to do something to remember the Holocaust. Initially, it was a commemoration of the Holocaust, which usually occurs in early May, called Yom HaShoah, and that is a collaboration between the Alliance and the Jewish Community Agency, and that event we'll be talking about later on. It will take place on the campus in the Cooperage on May 1st, I believe from 1 to 3 o'clock, and we'll be giving students more.
The relationship between memory, remembering the past, and conscience, how we interpret the present, the world in which we live. And usually I've gone on that topic for about 45 minutes. Today I'm going to talk about that for about 3 minutes and then get on to the situation in Darfur. But I did want to preface what I have to say with some remarks about the connection between remembering the past and especially remembering the Holocaust and viewing the world that we go and more with regard to the Holocaust was the product of a large number of choices and decisions that people made. Choices and decisions by perpetrators, but also choices and decisions by bystanders, including bystander nations, such as the United States. And what happened was not inevitable. It was the product of those choices and decisions. The same thing is true today. What will happen in Darfur is not inevitable, even though right now the trends look very negative. Of the government and of militias that it recruited among the Arab population of Darfur is very well established. It's been established by the United Nations, it's been established by the United States government, it's been established by independent human rights groups, it's been established by independent journalists. Everyone with any detachment who has looked at the situation has basically come to the same conclusion in terms of the responsibility of the Sudanese government and its allies for what is happening there. As I mentioned, I traveled about 200 yards from the border, so it was very close. There were something in the neighborhood of 10,000 people living right outside of a small town there in Chad. The UN has since created another camp nearby where these people have been able to be sheltered and accommodated. I met a number of people who had been attacked by Sudanese aircraft. This man lost his leg, actually, after he and a group of refugees, her tears were splashing down onto her cheeks. And she was saying, "What about my mother? What about my mother? I don't know where she is. I don't know if she's alive or if she's dead." And I felt like she was asking me for an answer, which I couldn't possibly give. And all I could think to say was, "Tell me your mother's name, and I will take her name back and tell other people, and you will until there's a good basis for action is increasing your knowledge." One way that you can keep up with what's happening is to go to our website, which I'll give you in just a minute. We have a regular newsletter that we send out electronically, which includes a weekly news summary. We also have a daily news feed on our website of news from Sudan. The second thing is to let your local media know that you care about this situation, because that's the way that we'll get word to more people. The fact is that our media states, just as bracelets by going to the Save Darfur website, which is www.savedarfur.org. And then the final thing that I wanted to show you, which you won't be able to see because the lights are on, but is our website is www.committeeonconscience, all one word, .org. I thank you very much for your attention, and now I think we've got time for questions. Are there any other questions? I'll start with the second one rather. It helps to tell the stories. I mean, I feel in a small way that I'm doing something constructive by telling them, and so I feel like they are a burden, as you suggest. But like all burdens, it's easier to bear if you share it, and as far as the Bush administration, the Bush administration has done more on Darfur than traditionally has been done in situations of this type. Secretary of State Powell took the initiative at the end of last June to go to Darfur, which was, I think, a significant step for him to do, both to associate himself personally with the issue, to call attention to it, and to help bring pressure on himself. Of last year, he announced his determination that what is happening in Darfur is genocide, which is really an unprecedented thing for the government to do. But by and large, the strategy has been one of working through the United Nations, of undertaking diplomacy. And I think that the gap is really in what priority is being given to this, given the level of seriousness. And I think filling that gap, that's our job. That's what we can do. Is the administration has done what it has out of goodwill and a sense of concern, but I think that extra oomph is this politically important or not? Does the public care about it? And that's why I think it's so important that the public let their views be known.
This, of course, reminds me of all the other historical genocides, and my experience and my history reading it is that people don't get involved unless there's an economic reason to do so. And that's often why people don't intervene in genocides, because the people who are being killed are not economically important to the outside world. So I'm curious if you see any, is there an economic connection here, or is this going to be marginalized like the rest of the genocides? Because America...
I think stated a truism that countries, governments, generally only act where they've got a hard interest involved. Now, I think in Sudan you can articulate a hard interest. It's not so much economic as security. That our experience over the last 10 years in particular has been that places where governments have loose control over their territory, where they engage in mass violence against their own citizens, cause a lot of other bad attack against his Kurdish population. Not only did the United States not do anything, it was actually giving him agricultural credits of $1 billion a year while he was doing it. That came back to haunt us because he was encouraged by that. In Sudan itself, in the early 90s, Osama bin Laden lived there. And he's got long-time connections with the regime there. So allowing this kind of violence often leads to something worse. But I think I want to challenge your premise that the idea that countries, including our country, will only respond when there are hard interests involved. Because I think that assumes that that's an unyielding law of nations and of society. And I think that that's the challenge that faces us as citizens, is whether that's what our nations see as individuals and as groups can be moved to respond to a situation because it's only human beings that are at stake and only their lives. And I think that that's the difference that we can make is to say that no, human beings are enough. There doesn't have to be oil. There don't have to be diamonds. That the fact that you've got a population numbering in the millions at risk is enough for us to do something to stop it. Yes, ma'am. Oh, all right. Who's in charge? Just as long as that's clear.
You just get to fill us in.
3 questions. 2 about...
3.
Well, you can choose.
She's in charge.
Okay. 2 about Sudan and 1 about Chad. What are the natural resources in the Sudan? How is this being...
As a response is reflected in the Africans tend to be more sedentary, the Arabs more nomadic. And one underlying tension that's made this violence possible, especially for the militias that are allied with the government, is that over time the desert is moving further south, the Sahara Desert, at a remarkable rate. It's like 6 kilometers per year, which you figure over 10 years, you're talking 45 miles or whatever. That was land that was arable, that's now rich in resources, but it could be a much more prosperous country than it is. It has oil now, which has been relatively recently developed, although most of the oil is farther to the east from Darfur. Although the oil fields do extend into southern Sudan and helped fuel conflict there, which hopefully has been resolved. It's got some timber. It has agriculture. It has often, even though it's often associated with starving people, it's been a net food exporter. It exports food to Saudi Arabia. So under good government that respected the rights of its citizens, it could be, a comfortable enough country. The second question was the media in Sudan. The media in Sudan is controlled by the government. It's a military dictatorship, basically a police state. So there's not a lot of free press. There's a marginal independent press that's shut down every once in a while. But by and large, the media is favorable to the government. And so they reflect the government line, which is basically Chad has welcomed the refugees in, but it's, as you can imagine, it's a very poor country. They don't really have the resources to deal with it, so it started creating tensions. It's also been somewhat destabilizing on Chadian politics for reasons you can at least imagine.
Gerald.
Say the U.S. gets involved, then what? It's the next step is war, or what do we do? Okay.
Well, I think that and that's what I'm doing. And there was a village called Muhajiria, which was the next village in line. And the African Union, which did not have a mandate to protect civilians, set up a very small force. I don't remember what it was, something like 35 of their protection force, which were lightly armed people, and then some of their unarmed monitors. So say 40 or 45 people in front of the village. Now they did that because there was a civilian contractor, international civilian contractor in the village. They were protecting the contractor. And the government didn't attack. And in fact, then they set up in the village that had just been destroyed, and people started returning to that village. And then eventually the government forces and the militia went away. So that leads one to believe that if there was a bigger force that could cover more of the country and that had a mandate to protect civilians, that it would fundamentally...
Oh, okay.
For those people that wanted to support and help by donating, what might you suggest, what organization, World Vision, Doctors Without Borders, or any others?
Well, I can tell you some of the ones that are working. We don't endorse particular organizations. Both of the ones that you mentioned are working in Chad and Darfur. Catholic Relief Services are working, but you can go and they will have a complete list of organizations that are working in Chad and or Darfur.
Excuse me, Jerry. One of the things we'll do is post some of these links up on the series webpage. We'll let you know about it through your socials. So we'll put down some of the websites that Jerry has given us and also some places where you can make contributions. Yeah?
I don't know. I just wanted to know, how can you said that our government really wants to help, but how can that be when I'm constantly seeing images that this is bad, or the people that you show is bad, or because even through our media, through our consolidated opinions, I call it, that we see on TV, it's portrayed that it's bad. So why, would people really want to, feel that it's numbers? Yeah, a lot of people can't see that it came from one common ancestor. So how do we, get past that stereotype?
Well, I think that that's a very important question and goes somewhat to the question that Elaine asked earlier, that it's part of the challenge that we face of creating a sense of empathy with others rather than an emphasis on difference. And absolutely true that in our country we still have a lot of challenges in that regard. And I think that in some ways, meeting those challenges, a constructive step in the direction of meeting those challenges is to deal with a situation like Darfur, where you can reach people with a message of empathy and of connection, and that the children laugh just like our children, and they cry just like our children, and they hurt just like our children. And I think that this all reinforces the message that focusing on differences and disparaging differences hurts our society. It doesn't help it.
We have the neocons gloating about the demise
of such a force in the order itself. My sense would be that the political obstacles, not just from the United States, but including from the United States, to actually creating such a force are still pretty high. And so that it's probably pretty far down the road before there's going to be any kind of standing force. I think what's much more likely, and some halting steps have been made in this direction, is the creation of a standing could coordinate troops that are contributed by member countries of the United Nations, so that you don't have to create the command structure from scratch, which is generally what's happening today. And I think that there are also some steps halting to increasing the capacity of more countries, including countries in Africa, to really effectively contribute to peacekeeping or peace enforcement missions. One problem that they had in Rwanda, and that is a problem, is that countries will contribute troops, but when they show up, they're not very well equipped, they're not very well trained, so they're not very effective. That's another thing that I think that there's some will to overcome that problem, but there's still a long way to go.
David, we'll get a letter where we can come back. David?
I recall from Erna's introductory remarks that you did testify in front of Congress on this very subject. This was a phenomenal presentation of these. It was compelling beyond words, and it took me quite a while to develop my composure to raise my hand. So I really thank you for what you've done here. What sort of reaction did members of Congress have when you brought this down to their attention?
Well, I should clarify that.
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, David referred to Myrna's noting that I had testified before Congress on Sudan. Don Corzine from New Jersey, Representative Payne from New Jersey, Representative Payne Wolf from Florida, very bipartisan. All of those people have spoken at the Holocaust Museum, actually, about this issue. There are a number of others. So that's one thing that gives me hope, is that there's a core on Congress that keep coming back to this issue. They lost some steam over the holidays with the election just because they leave Washington and they're not doing things, but now that Congress is back in session. One thing that I should say, though, is that right now, this week and next week, Congress is having what used to be called recess, but is now called district work period. And what that means is that your representatives are back here, and this is the best time to reach them. Both for all of you who are from this area, your representatives from here, for those of you who came from elsewhere, your representatives from home. There are relatively few opportunities to do that, but a good place to explore them would be on the Interaction website, and then find those organizations that are working and see if there are opportunities. There are relatively few international humanitarian workers, period, who are there. In part, it's just a very, very harsh environment. And when I was there, almost every Westerner that I met had either been sick or was sick or got Western Darfur, at least as of a few days ago. I don't know if it's changed. Basically, all the UN and other workers were locked down in the capital city because it was too dangerous. The Janjaweed had started saying, we're going to be attacking international workers. And so the security situation is so tense that they're just in their compounds. They're not actually helping people. And that follows on a continually tense situation. Also, the Sudanese government.
So if you're thinking of folding around.
Also, students in my section see me, I have some material to return to you.
Okay, Joe.
I've noticed a lot of genocide occurring when the world knows about it. You mentioned Rwanda. I would include Biafra in that. And during a time when people were wearing wristbands, and they go
easy for the French in particular, who already have a garrison in Chad, to provide a force to protect civilians in Darfur, or at least to enforce a no-fly zone. And part of the question was, why hasn't anyone proposed that? Well, actually, there have been. No-fly zone is something that a lot of people are pushing that does appear to be very feasible, could be accomplished with NATO assets. I mean, it would take NATO. The Africans don't really have the air assets to do it, but it could be done. It's something that
of the student movements that you have spoken about that brought about change. I'd say especially at the universities. I guess don't get behind that and don't believe that and don't push for that.
Oh, I see. You're focusing on the need for force. Well, I think that it may be that there might be some need for force, although a no-fly zone that only to Elaine at the beginning, and I think, well, if you have a question, I'll take it. But so I won't conclude with this, but I think it's very important. I think we're getting close to a critical mass on this. Things were building in the fall, and then the holidays came along, and then the tsunami, which distracted a lot of attention, obviously. And then in January, a peace agreement was signed to resolve the conflict in the south. And so a lot of people saw the headline, peace agreement in Sudan. And so those three things really just took the wind out of our sails. And in North Africa, which are Arab countries, and this emphasis on Arab-African nature of the conflict tends to cause the same fracture to exist in the African Union. So, that's created some diplomatic difficulties. But those are the countries that are the most influential in the African Union.
They in turn have the Arab element.
In some of those cases, yeah, in some they do. Yeah. Thank you.
One very brief announcement for